welcome everybody. This is a members live Reformed Fringe podcast, and we are going to be talking here to one of our members. His name is Matthew Yeomans. Did I say your last name right, Matt?
You did. You nailed it.
All right. This should be an interesting discussion. I kind of say that our tagline for the Reformed Fringe is that we're trying to be a bridge between two worlds, kind of the blurry creatures world, the fringy world, and then more the conservative, in my case, Reformed world, but conservative evangelical world. And people that don't talk about fringy stuff and people that don't talk about really very good theology. We want to bridge those two. And so we want to bring a little bit of Reformed into the fringe. And on today's show, we're going to be probably putting quite a bit of fringe into the Reformed. And this could be something that some of the listeners might have, they might not have ever come into even the discussion of the idea of alien abductees. I don't know where I stand on those issues. I've listened to a lot of shows about them. I think that there's a real phenomenon that's taking place. And I know that Matt has quite a few stories. He was telling us backstage that this has kind of been something he's experienced his whole life. So I want to, as a host, give Matt a platform to be able to just help me understand a world that I have never experienced before, but that I know many, many, many people have. Those numbers are in the millions, if my understanding of the literature and of people that have talked about this on many podcasts, radio shows and so on are right about it. So first found out about Matt from, first you joined quite a while ago, but you uploaded a video that was an orb video. And it was about 25 seconds long. And there is very clearly at least one orb, I think there might be more, that flew around the 20-second mark. Now, you guys in the member podcast can go and look that up. It was uploaded. Just look up Matt's name, do a search, and then you can go down and you can find the video. Look for around 20 seconds, and you will see an orb flashing through his bedroom.
By the way, on the rebroadcast, we'll B-roll over here so they can see it. So
right, exactly. So we will also upload this, and hopefully this will be there for when we rebroadcast this live in a couple of weeks or whenever it goes up. And we'll try and have some of the other videos that Matt wasn't able to upload for us here, but that he might want to talk about. And if you do talk about something, Matt, that you have video of, just send it to us in the meantime, and we'll be able to integrate that into the more produced show. So we also have, Rudy has uploaded, and I think that Hugh said it's there. We have a similar story. You have a similar story. Now, this was interesting in terms of orbs, because this took place when I think we might have talked about this on One Giant Steps, Rudy. I don't remember, but
we did.
We were both in the Tomb of Og, as they call it, in the Gilgal Rephaim up in the Golan Heights in Israel when we went out there to film our documentary.
Yep.
And when we were both in there, I took some pictures and some video. Nothing unusual was there when I was in it. But when you were in it, just a little bit later, you took some video. And when we were driving back to, I think, Tel Aviv for the evening or wherever it was we were staying, you said, "Man, I got to show you this. I got to show you this." And you had all these orbs that showed up in that video. And it was
a lot of them.
Yeah, it was not dust. There was nothing like that in there that I saw, and nothing my video captured or my pictures captured. And so Rudy has uploaded that as well, that you guys can go watch while you're listening to us talk about
thousands of them.
Yes, there were.
And it was bizarre because I was very, very hesitant to even say anything. I didn't want to be the weirdo. And I said, I kind of leaned up to you privately and I said, "Was there a lot of dust in there?" And you were like, "No." And I said, "Check this out." And I showed it to you. And we both had a whoa moment.
Yeah, we definitely did.
Yeah.
And especially because of the place that was and its association with the demonic realm. We know for a fact that they were doing rituals for the dead in that very chamber. And they've been doing it for thousands of years. So very, very interesting. So I'll just introduce you, Matt. Tell us a little bit about who you are, how you found out about the Fringe, your background, and then you can start to go into, let's go into that, to the video that you uploaded first, as a way to start this off.
Yeah. So just to make sure I'm not muted, right?
You're not muted. You're good.
Okay, great. So yeah, my name's, as Doug mentioned, my name's Matthew. I live in Tennessee. I came across the Fringe, I guess through YouTube. Actually, it started with Theocast, and I sort of followed John Moffat over to, I think at the time it was Kingdoms Unveiled.
Yeah.
And so, my theological position has morphed over time, I think, as most Christians do. I'm 34, and so I got saved when I was about 21. So a lot of the supernatural stuff I've experienced, at least like that I've noticed and have connected it with being supernatural, has actually increased and been more abundant post salvation. As I've grown in Christ, I've come to have more of a Reformed leaning, and then I've come across a ton of your teachings, Doug, on all kinds of topics that have been just an absolute gold mine. Heiser obviously was a huge influence for me as far as working out my worldview. Because you can imagine when somebody experiences stuff like this, you ask yourself, what's wrong with me, or what am I doing? Because that's often the accusation, is that you go to people, the rare few people that you go to, because you're afraid to go to people because you don't want them to think you're a nut. And so you go to the few people. You might go to your pastor, and they've never experienced something like that. They don't know what to do with that, especially if they're a more Reformed leaning. I've noticed that's extremely uncomfortable for them. And so they sort of just give you a take two of these and call me in the morning. Here's a counselor for $100 a meeting. Your insurance won't cover it. They essentially accuse you without accusing you. So they'll ask you. They essentially want to fine-tooth comb your life for what kind of sins you may be committing that may be opening this door. And I don't disagree with that being a potential mechanism in which these things access people's lives. But as you can imagine, somebody who's been saved for over a decade, I have had seasons of horrible sin. I've fallen back into very serious addiction and sin. And I've had seasons of walking really close to the Lord as well. But nevertheless, these experiences have always permeated regardless of the activity of sin that I was committing during that time. So do you want to talk about the Orb video specifically, or where do you want to go, Doug? Because there's a lot to unpack, really.
Yeah. What do you do for a living?
Sure. So I work, my main job, my 9 to 5, so to speak, is I work at I live in Smyrna, Tennessee, or I live in Murfreesboro. In the town over, there's Smyrna, Tennessee. We have the really big Nissan plant. So I work there on the weekends. My job is essentially I supervise a crew to sort of do maintenance would be too strong of a word. It's really a glorified janitorial position, but it pays well. And then my side thing, I'm somebody that has had ADHD, a very strong ADHD my entire life. So I'm a jack of all trades, but a master of none, right? So my current thing I've loved to be doing right now is printed circuit board repairs, electronics, microelectronics, and stuff like that. So
interesting. Yeah, why don't you tell us about the video that you uploaded? Why did you upload it? When did it happen? What are the circumstances behind it? What do you think that we're looking at?
So I took that video. So just to give
and why were you videoing? That's another question.
Yeah, right. Because what a weird what a weird thing to do, right? To have this motion activated camera in your room, which essentially is sitting where this camera is sitting right now. I just switched him out. Sorry, I hit the mute button there. The reason why I put a camera in my room is because of the many experiences that I have. Everything ranging from just the standard sleep paralysis to out-of-body experiences. I believe like the statistics for people that have out-of-body experiences is it's not very high in their lifetime. I've had well over 100 out-of-body experiences, forced out-of-body experiences. So my hope and desire for setting up this camera, because most of these experiences, if not really all of them, as far as the forced out-of-body experiences, would happen in the dream world, the dream experience. And so, are you familiar with Nathan McGillis?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, maybe, but I don't. Not that it doesn't ring a bell off the top of my head.
He used to sort of be a demonologist, and he's a really interesting guy. You should check him out. He essentially he calls it the phenomenon, and that's the way I kind of look at it as well. And you have noticed in my post, and the way that I put it is, if you remember, the category or the term that I had settled on was the fae, or the fair folk, or fairies. And I'll explain. Right. Yeah, I'll explain why I chose that. Which most people, if you said, hey, I'm being visited by fairies, or I'm being bothered by fairies, they would laugh at you. And in fact, if this didn't happen to me, I think I'd have a really hard time believing it. So, but anyways, getting back to why I put the camera in the room was, and you guys had talked about capturing these orbs, and basically Nathan McGillis proposes that what you see, whether it be an apparition or however it manifests, a UFO, a fairy, a Bigfoot, what you're seeing is whatever it wants you to see. It's somehow able to hack into the optical nerve, right? And I would agree with that theory, or the hypothesis, is because whenever I have these sleep paralysis out-of-body experiences, I feel the sensation in my optical nerve. There's this buzz. And if you look at most people's sleep paralysis accounts, especially those who experience it a lot, they'll talk about this buzz. And specifically when you turn your eyes left and right, which happens when you're in REM sleep. It's an autonomic part of your nervous system to facilitate REM sleep. It's similar to that. So I feel this buzz when I was having these sleep paralysis experiences. And what he proposes is that you're seeing something in your mind, but what's actually there is this entity, the phenomena, that is actually an orb, and they're always an orb. So some people may dual experience something, right? But they may see something similar or even different, but behind whatever they're seeing is always an orb, okay? And so the reason why I wanted to set up the camera was because I wanted to see, okay, if this is actually happening to me, if I'm being taken out of my body, is it happening physically? Am I leaving my house physically? Or is something in a more spiritual, abstract realm? And so that video that I posted of the orb was just one of many videos I have of inexplicable things essentially going on. So in the video, you see these. So do you want me to explain what I experienced in that video? Okay, sure. Yeah. So I of course it's always, and I've connected as I've journaled these things with astronomical bodies, the movement of astronomical bodies, the heavenly hosts. And there's a rabbit hole there that's really interesting. Specifically for me, it seems to be, if there's a full moon, I will have an experience 100%. It's going to happen. And in general, it will be 3 days in a row. And when it gets really bad, my wife, who never has experiences, she'll have sleep paralysis. So that's when I know mine that I'm experiencing are bad is when it starts spilling over to her, starts spilling over to my daughters, right? So that night I awoke, and I was laying there. I couldn't move, and this wasn't too long ago. This was only a few months ago that this happened. So I have many years of experiencing this. Um, the instant fear, it's this sort of dread that you feel, and it seems synthetic in a way. It seems like it's something putting an input into you, that it's not your fear, but rather something putting the fear into you, if that makes sense. And
Is
if
this
you're
something that, can I interrupt? Is this something that you sense when you're in the experience or when you're awake?
when you say in the experience or when you're awake, when you say when you're awake, are you talking about my waking hours?
Yeah, like you are right now, as opposed to whatever an out of body experience is. I mean, I assume that you're conscious, so you could be kind of awake there, but
Yes.
I would assume that your body is physically sleeping, right?
Yes, the body's physically there. But whatever, if it's the spirit, the soul, however that works, the mind, that is doing something else. Whether it is, we know that our brains are sort of these simulation machines. Whether it's happening on that level where your brain is interacting with another entity in a simulated way. But to answer your question, the fear that I'm experiencing is, so when I'm alerted to something happening, I open my eyes. My eyes don't actually open, by the way, in the real world, but in in the sleep realm, my eyes open, and I
Hmm.
figured that out. Figured that out over time. Most people think that their eyes open. Your eyes never open. It's your spiritual eyes that are opening, if that makes sense. And as soon as that happens, most people are familiar with having sleep paralysis. That is when the fear sets in, and it's a different type of fear. This isn't a fear that you would experience with almost getting hit by a car or being chased by somebody. This is an animalistic, very primal level fear that is unique to this experience. So if you've never experienced this, I would say it's highly likely you've never experienced this flavor of fear. If I was, for lack of a better word. Does that answer your question, Doug?
Yeah, it does. It reminded me of an experience that I had only a couple of months ago. It's the only time I've ever had this experience in my life. It was a waking dream, is all I can think of it as. I was in my bedroom, on my bed, right where my body was. I thought it was real, and I looked over, and there was a creature that was there. It was one of those kind of things where you're like, okay, I'm gonna wake myself up, and then I did, but I really wasn't awake. I was still in the dream state, and I was terrified. And it was only when I finally woke up that it ended. But I don't think I've ever had a realistic dream like that in my entire life. I'm 55 years old, so I don't know if that's something similar to what you're talking about or not.
I would say, Doug, that I would propose that what you just described is that wasn't, I wouldn't consider that actually a dream, in the
Yeah,
sense of,
it didn't feel like any kind of a dream that I've ever had in my life. It was very, very unique.
right, because we know when you dream, unless it's lucid dreaming, we know that when you dream, there's a part of your brain that kind of gets turned off, and you don't carry you over. You're sort of experiencing things, doing things that you would never do in real life that are, and you don't question it, right? It's only afterwards that you can, as from the observer effect, you can sort of look back and be like, oh, that was weird, right? Right. That
Yeah,
was just, even disgusting, terrible things, right? Um, this is different. You are imported into that. It is you that is experiencing it, and you are aware that you're experiencing it. But we'll get into this. There is some times where I have awakened, so to speak, halfway through an experience. And so there seems to be a hypnotic state they can put you into, where you're acting out these things that you're not aware of. Maybe and I would say this is happening to the general public on a mass scale, and most people aren't even aware of it. And I think what you probably experienced, Doug, was the Lord allowing you to sort of peek back into that world to confirm or affirm, yeah, this is a real thing. And certainly it's not unheard of, in fact very common. And I would say everybody that's listening to this, that you need to pray about this, because the hitchhiker effect is a real thing. That was one of the things that kept me silent for so long, was as soon as I would tell somebody about this who had never had these experiences, a week later they would come to me and they would tell me, Matt, I had this experience after you told me your experience, and that sort of shut me up for a while. And I think that was their intention. So the entities, when you look into them, they will look back at you. They want to know why you're looking at them. They don't like prying eyes, so to speak. And I would say there's a certain level of trafficking going on. And we can get more into that. I want to go back to the orb video and explain what I experienced. So I opened my eyes, and the way that I experienced it was, and there's something about doorways with these entities. They love to stand at doorways, and I don't know if there's a symbol there. Jesus says he is the door. These are like a false, like it's almost like a mockery of Jesus, I would think, but these entities act in a very legalistic way, and a lot of times they like to stand at the doorway and just peek at you. And they do that with windows, mirrors. I grew up Catholic, and I'm Filipino. I grew up north in Connecticut, and my grandparents, or my grandmother, who's from the Philippines, she'd always cover her mirrors when they went to bed. So and we can get more into my past, because that plays a lot into this. But anyways, I open my eyes, so to speak, and I'm aware that I'm laying on my stomach. And I don't really know how to describe this other than you just have a knowing. It's the same thing with the communication that one experiences in these states, is you oftentimes don't hear it, though you can. Things are communicated through thought. It's not, you don't see lips talk, lips generally don't move in these experiences. It's they look at you, and there's a communication that happens. And you will, when I think about it, you do actually hear it. I think I hit my mute button again there. So anyways, I'm laying on my stomach, and I have this sense of something. I'm trying to remember the order of events correctly now. I have the sense of something coming to me, landing onto me, and preventing me from moving, if that makes sense. And then I had the sense that it then moved to the kitchen, which my kitchen, so this is my bedroom, obviously behind me. If you look in the video, you see my bed, and my kitchen door is sort of across from my bed. So there's something about my kitchen, and I have videos of me recording my kitchen door from my bedroom, and there will be these random flashes of light that just sort of happen, which I have a ton of those. But I experienced it. It went to the door, and then I'm trying to think now what happened. But oh, that's right. I had one of the worst sleep paralysis attacks I've ever had. So my wife, obviously, she's slept next to me for the last decade. She is very familiar with my experiences in sleep paralysis, and and shame on us, but we kind of had gotten into a role where she would just sort of nudge me, and that would sort of allow me to come out of the sleep paralysis instead of praying, right? Because I can't speak, because I can't move my body. And so she nudged me, and she thought I came out of it, but actually I didn't come out of it. She sort of rolled over, and I'm trying to move, and I'm trying to talk, and I can't. And she can hear me I'm mumbling, I'm moaning, and she realizes I'm not out of it. And this goes on for 2 minutes. Now, 2 minutes doesn't seem like a long time when you talk about it, but actually in a sleep paralysis experience where you're trying to struggle and get out and your body's like cement, 2 minutes is an extremely long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one thing I also want to mention, I have captured all these things on video, but I have not once a single time captured the sleep paralysis happening. Not once. Everything else gets captured.
So does that mean that you're, when you have a video of your body, that it looks like you're just sleeping normally? Is that what you mean?
Well, I've never caught it, but according to what my wife tells me, yeah, I mean, especially when I go in these out-of-body astral projection, as the occult puts it, these out-of-body states, yeah, it's as if I'm sleeping. The weird thing is when you go out of body, I don't know if it's the Holy Spirit, if he's warning me, but there's this sense that once you're out for a certain amount of time, there's a sense within you saying, you better get back to your body right now, because if you don't, you won't be able to get back into it. And it's a sort of urging. And over the years of being in these astral experiences, though not with my consent, but I just want to make that clear. I'm not a consenting practitioner of occult, astral projection. This is happening without my consent. I've obviously have sort of built a database in my mind of how these things happen. So what the video captures is similar to what I explained, and the timing was perfect because my wife, we often, when we wake up with these sleep paralysis experiences, there's a little red light on the camera because it's shooting an infrared light into the room. So it's because it's night vision. And, she said, or I said to her, I was like, it had to have captured us in the sleep paralysis experience and you waking me up out of it because I can see the red light. And she's like, yeah, it had to have, but it didn't record that. And that happens all the time. It won't record it. It's like this.
It won't record the part where she's trying to wake you up?
No, never once.
Really?
It'll record before, it'll record after.
Does it have missing timestamp on the video?
So it's set for motion. And
okay.
I've considered setting up a 24-hour camera. I just haven't gotten to doing that really. But it is set.
She's trying to wake you up. That's motion.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. And it's so weird because anytime it happens, specifically the sleep paralysis attacks, my cat, usually almost every time, it's like he's cued. It's like they tell him, I don't know why. I don't know if they don't like cats or something, but it's like he's cued to get up and leave. And then, of course, the timing is always around 3 a.m., right? And
is
so the
really?
video, yeah. I mean, the time's always usually in that window of like 2 to 4 a.m. It's in that window. Now, the video essentially confirms what I experienced, but slightly different. And people can go back and watch the video. And I actually posted a later post with that video where I sort of explain what's going on in the video and I slow it down and show. But, you talked about dust earlier. And I think a lot of people, when they see this stuff, they go, oh, that's just dust, right? Mm-hmm. That's what the common objection is. I have many videos of dust. Dust doesn't come in as 3 orbs, one landing on you as you're experiencing this in a waking dream, one blinking like this. If you watch it, it goes boop, boop, boop like that. It's not going straight. It's going up and down and up and down, and it's blinking, right? And then it goes into my kitchen door, right? And then I think there was another one. so that it was exactly as I had described before I'd even looked at the video, that something came to me, and I thought that same thing went to the door, but it was two different lights or two different orbs.
So you're having sleep paralysis while these orbs are going on.
Yes.
Do you remember anything about what was happening in your other state of mind?
Can you be more clear with what you're asking?
Do you remember seeing any entities?
Oh, in this specific experience?
Yeah, not watching the camera, but while you were under the sleep paralysis.
Sure. But in this specific experience, no. But I have so many other experiences where, yes, absolutely. But in this specific experience, no. It's more relayed and felt as a presence rather than seeing. And most of the time when I do see something, most of the time it's a sort of blurry creature.
Yeah.
Right? It's a sort of dark, hazy figure.
Yeah.
But I've had other experiences where I've seen it face. Some of them, I call it a mask, wearing different faces. One of them being my mother's face. My mother committed suicide, so a lot. And I'll say this, and then I'll kind of hand it back to you, Doug. But a lot of people have an experience when a loved one passes away, where they have a dream afterwards, where their loved one is coming to them and saying goodbye. And I even allowed for that in my theology, that maybe God was allowing a special grace, right? Whether it was or not. But I've changed my stance on that because of a specific experience we can get into. I believe that people are actually being initiated when that happens, and it's wearing a mask. Because I don't think these things can generally just have access to you. You have to, in some way, agree to allow them access. Whether you know it's a deceitful access or not, it doesn't matter to them.
So I'm curious about how you think about this part theologically and biologically, actually. So I kind of take Timothy Alberino's view that the UFO phenomenon has both immaterial and material aspects to it. So like I have no Rudy and I actually did a show on this for Giant Steps that I think it's the only show that we never actually released.
We still can.
What's that?
We probably should still.
Yeah, we probably should.
Yeah, you should.
The idea that there are craft, that there are biologics, whether they're gray aliens or whatever, that this has come out in, government reports and stuff like that, especially in the last couple of years. So I take that there is a physical phenomenon here. What you're talking about seems to be very different from that. It seems to be taking place in the spirit realm. Not that it's not a literal realm, but it's not material in the way that we are experiencing the material world right now, other than being on, of course, the internet, which is immaterial and bizarre and weird. But right. So I'm wondering, and you got me thinking about this with fairies. We have a guy in the Fringe, I won't say his name, who lives over in Ireland, and a super smart guy. People in the Fringe, many know who he is, but since it's going out to the rest of the world, I don't want to tell people. But he living in Ireland has lots of fairy stories, and he's of the opinion that fairies are very demonic. By which I mean, like, literally kind of disembodied Nephilim sort of demon stuff, that it's very immaterial, but it's very real. I mean, over there they actually have entire groves of trees, or even just one standing tree where nobody's allowed to cut the grass anywhere around it because that's a fairy tree, and they live there. And it's like the law. It's actually in law. You can't do that. You can't cut it down. You can't trim the stuff around it because it belongs to them. It's how seriously they take it over there. So this idea that we're dealing here with demonic presence, as opposed to maybe I guess in my paradigm, Watcher presence, Sons of God presence, Satan presence, which is I think different.
Crossover.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, but I'm wondering, go ahead and talk about how you've learned to think about this stuff theologically.
Certainly. So, and this is why I'm so thankful for having teachers like Heiser that have gone into depth with the Divine Council worldview, because I always had that perspective of my Bible, but I couldn't put it into words, and I couldn't broach it with people. And then when I found Heiser, it was like he was saying all the things I had been thinking, and it was like he made the thing that was sort of nebulous concrete.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, Doug, that I would actually, if you take the one experience as I described it, it sounds like an immaterial experience. But I would actually say if you were to look at all of my experiences, you would see that it's very much a very physical experience. I think when you pull on a string in the spiritual realm, you naturally would pull on a string in the physical realm. They're intertwined in my world.
So are you talking about it in terms of like in a poltergeist movie where you're having effects in the physical world, like things fly across the room? Or are you talking about the entities themselves manifesting physically?
Yeah.
Because like in my mind, in Orb, we can talk about this a little bit, Rudy. Like when you were in the tomb, and did you have weird senses? Did you feel like there was a presence that was in there with you physically? I never did.
What's really funny about that? You and I we're great friends now, lifelong friends. But back then we were still relatively new to each other, and so now I feel comfortable to tell you. And again, we laughed about this a little bit in the backstage area, because I've said many times that I am a reluctant charismatic, because I was raised a charismatic, but I'm also a grounded charismatic. So I'm a reluctant charismatic. But I feel like now, knowing you as I do now, that I feel a lot more freedom that I can share things with you, even if I know they don't line up with the basis of your Reformed theology. So and I get that. Back then I didn't, and I held back on a lot of things.
But this is why we have the Reformed Fringe, because the Reformed theology really is very, very underdeveloped when it comes to this entire topic. I'll just be honest with you.
Yeah. So if you remember, the fellow that was with us, and I'm forgetting his name, but the Israeli guy that was with us.
Adam?
He was talking. Adam, thank you. He was talking about it from the moment that we got there.
Adam, I think I'm sitting here. I live here. I'm sitting here for what, an hour and a half, and I'm not like this, and I'm soaking up this energy. There's a very special energy here that I just can't explain.
He's on film saying, "I'm feeling a very strange energy."
Yeah, he is. Mm-hmm.
I was feeling it too. I was feeling my hairs up on the end and whatnot. So sitting in there, obviously, anytime you're in a place that's a burial chamber, it's kind of odd. But I would feel it come and go, So when we looked at the footage and saw all of that, it really was not. It was, from a documentary standpoint, this is really cool. We got this really cool footage. But really thinking about it, it was definitely a creepy kind of moment. I don't know how else to put it, But yeah, I did definitely feel that there was something going on in the spiritual realm. Absolutely.
So to piggyback off of that and to answer your question, Doug, as I mentioned already, they're messing with, or are able to mess with, my camera, right? They're able to interact with my camera, right? And to prevent recording. I listen to white noise when I sleep. It's like I'm addicted to white noise. And there's something about white noise, or really, like, I don't know if it's frequencies or something. That's a big thing in the occult, is frequencies. The other night I was laying there and I had the white noise on my Google Home playing, and kind of drifting in and out of sleep, and I hear through the white noise, it sort of drowns slowly as I feel that the sleep come on, and I hear very clearly a voice come through the Google Home and say, "I live here." And I woke up and I said, "No, you don't."
Thank you.
You know, they are, I believe, very physical, technologically advanced, but they're also spiritual, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
And we see that reflected in the Bible, certainly. You know, so I would say that, could one manifest and pick up a piece of food and eat it? I would say, yeah. Is there literal physical craft? I would say, yeah. Now, are they going to another planet where they manufacture the craft? I don't know. I mentioned that I've been getting into PCB repairs, electronics repairs.
Yeah,
and
I found that interesting.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the connection that I see with, you know, ancient symbols and ruins used for witchcraft or alchemy, and the layout of printed circuit boards,
right,
and the schematics of printed circuit boards. So I believe these things are indeed using technology, and I have seen the effects of that, right? Whether it be through the camera or whether it be through people going insane because of using artificial intelligence, large language models to, tell them what to do and to talk to those instead of the Holy Spirit or getting wise counsel. I've seen people go insane from that, so and as far as the government being involved, I don't think we could really put this into one, episode, so to speak, or one get together, but I would say it's all deeply interconnected. You have the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, right? Which I have, personally experienced. But you also have the gods. You have these entities that are sitting on literal thrones. So I'm connected as a missionary to Ghana, the Dagomba people. It's a tribe in Ghana in Tamale, and so I am connected with Brother Joshua Muhammad, and I'll share that information. And I don't know if Rudy, if you can like put it in there so people can kind of look into his ministry.
Sure.
Because support is needed, and he's reformed.
Yeah, you bet.
And he's doing a very important thing over there in Ghana. On my flight in, I've noticed when I get tired, that's when the spiritual eyes, so to speak, I don't know why I can experience it and other people can't. Maybe other people write it off as imagination. But when I go and lay down to sleep at night, and I close my eyes, I see faces. When I close my eyes, I don't see black. In fact, when my eyes are open, even as I look at surfaces, white surfaces, other colored surfaces, I have what's called snow. It's like snowy vision syndrome, and it's essentially this overlay on your way that you perceive the world, where it's like a web of like fuzz, like if you remember the old analog TVs, right?
Oh yeah,
it's sort of that.
Poltergeist movie.
Yeah, I've always
right
TV through that.
Exactly. There's something, and there's a connection there. That's the reason why they put that in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always looked up at the sky, could see that in the sky, specific. So.
Clarification: is that something that happens to you physically, like the filter or film or something you have on you?
Yeah, so I don't know if they understand enough about it where they know what the biological mechanism behind that is. And obviously there's a degree, there's a spectrum here. Some people have it worse than other people. But it
sounds like it's something that they're exploiting.
Yes. Well, I would say if you guys are familiar with the fair folk and fairy lore, there is this idea of fairy sight. So I don't know if it's a genome thing. I don't know if it's something that you are initiated into or more people are sensitive to it. I don't know where it comes from. It's something that's always been there for me. But as I mentioned, when I was coming in on the plane, as we crossed a certain border to go to where we were going, and I was tired because I had been up for so many hours, as you can imagine when you're traveling to somewhere like Africa. You have all this layover time and stuff, and you can't sleep very well in the chairs. But as I get tired, I experience things more. I see things more when I close my eyes. The activity kicks up, so to speak, and I have my eyes closed, and I see this entity sitting on a throne, grinning at me. He's got blue skin, red eyes, and like shark teeth, and he's very like just grinning, this grin of just malevolence, and he's looking at me, and that's not an uncommon experience for me to have. So when I first really noticed this, especially after being a Christian, I thought maybe these were people, the faces I was seeing, I thought maybe these were people that God wanted me to pray for. I didn't know what to make of that. But now I don't. I think it's something else putting a face on, and I don't know if it's an electrical signal. I don't know how that works, but yeah.
Matt, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm just curious, just out of curiosity. No commentary on my end about this. Just curiosity. How do you deal with those moments? Like when you're having those experiences, I realize that there's fear involved. I totally get that. But are you praying? Are you calling out to the Lord? What's your knee-jerk reaction to do during those moments?
That's a really good question. So because I've experienced this so often, unfortunately my initial reaction now is anger. I want to get up and physically, in the spiritual realm, physically grab them, which is a bit prideful or boastful sounding, or hubris maybe. But
it is frustrating.
Yeah,
It's understandable.
The Lord has reminded me multiple times over to call out to Him, because that stops the experience, right? Most of the time. I would say that there's some times where that doesn't stop it, and we can get into that if we want to, but
yeah. So that kind of leads me to a question about, you brought up being something with Catholicism, not being a Christian, and it makes me want to ask the question I know that so many people ask, which is, well, how can this happen to Christians? And that reminded me of it, because you're like, well, when I call out to the Lord, most of the time it goes away. But you said not all the time. And it reminds me of, especially in the abduction phenomenon, which seems it's similar to this, but I think also different, because I think those people actually, there's reason to believe that they go somewhere, like physically, they're gone.
Yeah.
Right.
They disappear.
So it's
I think that's the thing too, for sure.
Yeah, because it's a physical phenomenon. It's kind of like, and again, I think Alberino has done some good thinking on this. It's like, if you're at a schoolyard and a bully comes up and kicks you, you can't just rebuke him in the name of Jesus and it stop happening, because it's a physical phenomenon. There's something there. So talk to us about that relationship between not being a Christian, being a Christian, the weird syncretistic world of Catholicism, and how you think all that works together.
Okay, that's a good pivot point, because that can go into my past, right? So when I say Catholicism, what I mean is paganism, with the saints replacing the gods.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather, he, as I grew up, he would always invite me to have these seances and to talk to my guides. and I didn't think it was working. But now that I look back, I remember having some dreams when I would intentionally do that. I just read them off as dreams at the time. Now I know, as those things have happened more and more, what was really going on. You know, I grew up as a Catholic, you know, but I wasn't, as most Catholics, I wasn't a practicing Catholic. I didn't ever go to church. I remember going to like a Sunday school, but the Jesus that I learned about in Catholicism was not the Jesus that I met 10, or now it's been what, 15, about 15 years ago, you know. It's a very different being, who they call Jesus and who Jesus actually is, right? Biblical Jesus. Sorry, I kind of lost track of what you had asked me, Doug.
Just the relationship between being a Christian, non-Christian, you throw Catholicism in there with its superstition and stuff, and then the phenomenon itself and why it keeps happening, even though you're a Christian.
Yeah, in fact, it happens more because I'm a Christian, I would say. I don't know if that would have naturally happened if for some reason, I know it doesn't work this way, but if I didn't become a Christian, right? If it would have still amped up over time, but I didn't have a way to sort of break it down and understand what was going on, maybe it would have gone insane or something. But for me, it has amped up after being saved, you know? And so I kind of mentioned this in the beginning, you know, it's a lonely road, you know? It's a sad, lonely place to be sometimes, because there's not many people that can understand what you're talking about. And generally the rare few that do are insane. You know, they're not a lot of times they're not saved, you know. Now you do sometimes come across other Christians who are saved, which, like, for example, in the Reformed Fringe, app and the Circle app, I've met quite a few, and that's been awesome for me, but I've gone to my pastor with the situation, and I had to work through some anger I had towards him, because he didn't know what to do, and sort of just accused me of having a sin issue, I don't really know why it happens to me. The only thing I can connect it to is, I have some trauma, sexual abuse when I was a kid, the invitation into the occult. My older brother was a practitioner of the occult for the longest time. He was actually this sounds silly, like I'm talking about Dungeons and Dragons, but he was actually a warlock, So there's a whole, backstory there, but the calling on the name of Jesus generally does work. There's only been a few times that it hasn't worked for me, or rather, maybe it had a delayed response. I can tell that story if you'd like.
Sure.
That kind of gets into the fairy thing. In fact, I think that'd probably be a good story to tell. I mean, there's kind of two big ones I can think of. There's the events that happened around when I went to Ghana as a missionary, and then there's the thing for the fairy thing and how I connected them. But it's really up to you. What would you want me to?
Stories are always fascinating to me. I just have to say, I'm a sucker for them.
Yeah. I just want to make sure I get my order of events correct. Can you guys give me a second so I can look at my notes?
Sure, no problem.
Over the years, I've always have notated these things.
Yeah, while you're looking at those, Matthew, just wanted to make a comment about what you said regarding these things happening that some Christians will say because you have sin in your life. When I read the New Testament, I see the devil coming after Christians, not just Christians that are sinning. They come
Absolutely.
after Christians. That's what the devil does. He doesn't just go after the bad Christians. He goes after Christians, and we're all told to fight the devil, and with the armor of God and Ephesians 6 and resist the temptation, like James says, and those kinds of things. So it really bothers me when Christians pull that kind of stuff for multiple reasons. But that's one of the reasons, obviously, why I hope it's obvious that we wanted to start the Reformed Fringe, so that people can actually have a place to talk about it and not feel ashamed like they're doing something horribly wrong in their life in order to get the devil to go after them.
Yeah.
It seems like also sometimes that, and I hate to say this, I'm obviously not singling anybody out in any way, but it feels like a lot of times, a lot of pastors are ill prepared to deal with those issues.
Oh yeah, because we don't talk about it, and we don't have any kind of worldview frameworks for it, and so it's extremely uncomfortable.
Right.
When especially as a pastor, when you're supposed to know all the answers, right, and you don't have any answers, and you don't have a way to think about the answers because you're not allowed to talk about it yourself. So then somebody else comes up to talk to you about it, and so the only thing that you can do is just kind of shame them, right? And it's like, all I'm doing is trying to tell you my experience.
It's kind of like the whole thing of the bones going missing, and the whole theory of the Smithsonian coming and taking them. Yeah. The thing is that if at any given point they acknowledge that there are these Nephilim bones, then their entire worldview, their entire narrative has to change.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's the same thing with a lot of pastors. Just kind of like ignore it and maybe it'll go away, and I'll never have to get off.
We're seeing the same thing happen right now, Rudy, with the Epstein files. I made a post on Facebook
Absolutely.
a couple of days ago about how some people disagreed from their feeds, but my feed has been, I have seen almost no Christians talking about this at all. This is literally the biggest news in the history of Earth, and nobody's talking about it.
It's like the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, the cognitive dissonance is so bad that we cannot face reality.
Yep.
And so we're just going to pretend that reality doesn't exist. And that's not a good way to live in a world that we're supposed to be living in the light of truth.
Yep.
So
the fact that you brought up Epstein, maybe that's where I should go, because I've been recently delving into Epstein's or his story, or the Epstein files. And it made me think of this one out-of-body experience I had, and I titled it in my notepad here, I call it the Green Star Room event or experience. So this happened this wasn't years ago. This was, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so. There was a time when I was having, a lot of out-of-body experiences, like in a compressed period of time. Like lately, I haven't been having them. I haven't had sleep paralysis in a while. Actually, last night I was working in my garage. I was up very late, and there was a shift in the atmosphere, and I had a sense. Just a bad feeling, kind of a sense. And I don't know if it was because I was going to come and talk on the show, but kind of talking about what you were talking about. I've noticed that a lot of the experiences that I have are often a reaction to situations where I'm, because a lot of my ministry has been to those in the occult, because I can talk their lingo, because I have walked in their shoes, so a lot of times it's when I've, spread the gospel to somebody that is in the occult. It's a sort of intimidation tactic. So I guess I'll tell this story. So I got up. I guess I used the restroom, and then I said here I felt prompted to pray, but felt discouraged. I must have had something going on in my life at the time.
Are you at home when this is happening?
Yeah. So
okay.
I'm trying to help myself remember what might have been going on in my life at the time, because you can imagine having this happen so many times. It kind of gets all jumbled in your head. The events don't. I can remember the events, but like where and when it happened, that gets jumbled for me. That may just be a memory problem for me. But anyways, so I lay down in the bed, and I'm falling back asleep, and a lot of times I can feel when the sleep paralysis is going to happen. It has a distinct feeling. And if you look into the occult, and I figured this out over the years by unintentional trial and error, but if you look into the occult, they will say that sleep paralysis is the door to astral projection. And I've found that to be true, right? The sleep paralysis is the beginning, and when you can get pushed out of your body, that's when you're in the astral projection world, right? And Rudy, you had asked me what my initial knee-jerk reaction is to these entities and I said anger, and I believe that's by design. I believe they did that intentionally because they knew that I would literally try to physically move my body, and by doing that, I would tear my spirit out of my body, and that was a trap. And once they had gotten me to do that, well, it was like the door was open. Now they could take me all the time, So there's something to that, I want to say. But anyways, I'm laying down, and do you guys remember I know you've been accused of having Star Wars theology, Doug.
Right.
You remember in
Revelation Star Wars theology, whatever
Yeah.
that's supposed to mean.
Oh man. Hey, you know how in Star Wars when they go into the warp drive, right? And you see the stars.
The stars, yeah.
Yeah. So I lay there and I feel the sleep paralysis coming on, and as I mentioned, I see stuff when my eyes are closed, and especially as I'm going into sleep or as I'm tired, right? And this is like 4 or 3 in the morning. I just got up to use the bathroom and laid back down, and I start seeing a shape form around me that's like a tunnel, and it's a tunnel of stars, and I'm being sort of pushed up and ejected out of my body, and I have the sense that I go up, and I'm going up into this other realm, and I sort of drop down, and as I'm dropping down, the stars around me change color. They go from this blue-white, like how stars normally look, to green. And I'm standing in this very large room, but it's a room that, as if the floors in the wall, in the ceiling, as if I was standing in like a glass box inside of space, because the walls are made of stars, So I'm looking, and I'm sort of floating or standing on this platform, and 3 out of the 4 walls are these stars, and above me and below me are stars, and it feels like I'm in a staging area that can move into another area, like a portal or a door. And one of the places I look to, which is the only one, is open, and it looks like the opening to, as if you were walking through a shopping mall and you were looking into one of like the big box stores, where they tend to have the bigger doors, and you can see all the stuff, right? So I'm looking at one of the walls, and it's open, and there's a ton of activity. I can hear things like people talking and stuff like that is going on. So I sort of make my way over there, and by this time I should know I need to call on the Lord and tell him to get me out of there, But sometimes my curiosity gets the best of me.
Are you still feeling fear at those moments when all of that has happened? Are you still in a state of fear, or are you kind of lucid?
Generally, once you get to the out of body experience, if you push through the fear, right, that it goes away. When you go to the out of body experience, you become very curious, you know, and I don't know if that's just how I am by nature in general. I would imagine most people would be curious. And I should say, though, if this ever happens to you, don't be curious. You need to call on the Lord and have him get you out of there, because it is always, every single time, a trap. And you don't need to go see what's around the corner. I promise. It's never good, and it never leads to anything good. Disclaimer aside, not following my own advice, I, you know, you don't walk in this realm. You sort of just think and you go, right? And so I moved towards this door, and it looks like a buffet inside. You know, it looks like a diner, and it's quite large. And as soon as you go in, there's this front waiting room where people sort of pay at the cashier, and there's a cashier with, you know, or a lady working the cashier. There's this mother and her daughter, and I remember they're having this conversation in front of me. So the cashier is to my right. In front of me, there's one sort of seating area that's massive, and I see all these people sitting and, you know, talking and stuff like that. And they look different. You know, the dream world doesn't look the same as this world. Obviously, it's much more blurry, I would say. You know, not always, but it is often very blurry. Unless you're focusing in on a detail. But when you when you have the wherewithal to focus in on a detail, things tend to morph. So it's weird. So I noticed this daughter and mother are having this exchange with this cashier, and I guess they pay for their food, and they're gonna leave out that same exit that I just came in, apparently. And there's a seating area also to my left, so the opposite of the cashier. And these booths there's 2 rows of booths on the walls, and there's a raised center in the middle with booths, and there's people sitting in random booths. And I start going that way because I see a man that's sitting there looking at me, and this man looks dead. He looks like a dead, withered man, and he has this smile that's missing teeth, and he's got like burns and cuts on him. And he's grinning at me, and he just looks disgusting. He looks like a zombie almost. And he's sort of grinning at me. And that, for some reason, makes me kind of go towards him. Like, why are you? Because out of all the beings or people or things that are there, he sees me, but the other people, for some reason, don't notice me or see me, or if they're even real people, or they may just be constructs. They may just be simulations. I don't know. But this entity is looking at me, and that draws my attention. So I start advancing towards him, and as I do, I notice that there's a baby boy or toddler in his lap. And I want to be careful how I describe this, but he starts being romantic with this baby boy, like, you know, a few months old, kind of, you know, age range. And I get really mad, and I come up to him, and I said, "What are you doing?" And I actually started cussing at him because I was so mad. And I went to smack the child out of his hand, and he sort of looked up at me after he was kissing this thing, which wasn't a child. It was like a doll dead thing that looked like a child. And as I was going to smack him, I realized something else is coming towards me that's walking down that aisle, and it's another dead man, but he has long white hair, and his eyes are gone. And he comes up to me, and he grabs my arm before I smack him, and he's smiling at me. And it was this sense of, I got you now. There was that sense of like, just the sense of, I got you now. You're screwed, you know? And that's when I was like, beam me up, Jesus, you know, get me out of here. My curiosity has gotten the best of me once again. You've warned me many times not to do this, yet I still have gone forward because I don't know why. And so this crosses into the physical and the spiritual experience, because what's interesting is I call out to Jesus, and Jesus, of course, obliges, and I get picked up sort of by my back like this and dropped off into my body. but I still feel this arm, my arm, being held on by something. And as I land back in my bed, I have my arm out physically like this. Something's holding my arm until I open my eyes. And when I open my eyes, there's nothing there. But I woke up feeling something holding my arm. And the next day, there were scratches there, right?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about that.
Yeah. So, and that's not the worst physical reaction. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with what a fairy shot is, but I had an experience one time where I thought and just full disclosure, I was using methamphetamine and heroin at the time. I was in a very serious season of sin in my life. So if anybody told me this story, I'd be like, he was hallucinating, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here's the reason why it gives me pause. I know what meth hallucinations look like, okay? One of these, one day, and this was a long time ago. It was after I was saved. But I'm out and about in Antioch, Tennessee, and I have this condition along with my meth addiction called Morgellons disease. Do you guys remember that? Morgellons disease?
I've heard of it.
You remember where people had stuff coming up out of their skin? There was like fibers. And they connected it with Lyme disease, which I ended up having. And the methamphetamine seemed to make that worse. And there's something to be said about parasites and demons. I believe that in some way, parasites somehow are a host or a key to infect or mess with a human. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But anyways, I'm walking on the sidewalk. I have a very bad panic attack. I think I'm about to die. I look down at my feet and I feel like something hit me, like something shot me. And I look down at my feet, and I had looked online to try to figure out what this was forever. And I could not find anything until like fairly recently when I started looking into fairy lore, right? This was way before I connected the fairy thing. I looked down at my feet, and there's like, as if my feet are bubbling, there's these blue bubbles, like the color of your veins, coming up out of my feet. And when I look down at that, this is happening in real life. You can imagine, I almost fainted. I'm like, what is happening right now? And I'm like, I have to be hallucinating. Like, what am I looking at? And I had that, sixth sense of like unease come over me because of what I'm looking at looks impossible. It's like when you see somebody like get their hand cut off or something, or if it happens to you, that moment before the pain, there's this sixth sense of unease. You get this tingle, the hairs on your neck stand up. And then all of a sudden, all this stuff started coming up out of my skin and falling out of my skin. I go into the store across the street because I think I'm about to die. And I just want to be somewhere where in case I die, or if I have a cardiac event, somebody can call the ambulance, right?
Right.
I walk in the store fully thinking I'm hallucinating. And I walk in, and one of the attendants that's working there is just looking at me with like his jaw dropped. And I realize he's looking at me, and I ask him what, and he's like, dude, what is going on with your skin? And I was like, you see this? And he's like, what the bleep? What, bro, what is that? And the only way I can describe it is it looked like scales bubbling up out of my skin and falling out of my skin. And he could see it too.
Well,
and that was a moment that confirmed that what I was experiencing was a real physical whatever,
well, it's an attack, bro. It's an attack. That's there's no other that classifies a spiritual attack, and that's not of the Lord,
Well, I would say it was probably allowed by the Lord because I was using meth.
Well, I was just wondering.
That's allowed, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you've got these classes of drugs that, in my opinion, make crossing over easier.
Absolutely.
I wonder if those might not actually have a permanent effect on somebody's life, where it's like they destroy the door that's naturally there, so things can kind of go back and forth. for the rest of your life, even, without, even if you're a Christian or whatever? I have no idea.
Man,
It makes me wonder.
If you just looking at it from the divine council worldview, we know that these entities are territorial, right? Once they've been somewhere, they've taken possession of it, they've taken control of it. They want to stay there. They like it. We don't want to go back in the spirit realm. Put us into pigs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, to echo what you're saying, Doug, I wonder if all the years, because I agree 100% with the notion that drugs open up spiritual gateways.
Certain drugs. I don't think they all do. But
No. Right, exactly. Well, I mean,
hallucinogenics, yeah.
If you look at the book of Enoch, there is some
The cutting of roots.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So if you're going down that road, a couple of things, and I'm certainly not gonna. I don't want to interrupt your story, but there's a couple of things. The first one to me is if you had a history of drug use, is it possible? Is it possible that there are some doors that have gotten jammed open that is facilitating this, right? First of all, and second of all, if you are, and again, I pose it as a question. If you are in a situation where sometimes you ask the Lord to end it and it doesn't, could it be that what you're in right now is actually, you have to be really careful how I say this, that you're actually almost in a discovery and training phase of what you are able to do in this state, so that one day you can actually take the battle back to them, and from a spiritual standpoint.
Yeah, I have wondered that, and I've certainly tried to be careful with that. As I had one very vivid experience where I had the door was sort of opened up for me to go out of body, and this being, I believe was an angel, was standing in my bathroom doorway, and I was, sort of wondering about, if it was right or wrong, because I would sometimes go up and out of my body and up in these cosmic realms and I'd stand there and be like, what do I do? I'm up here now. And I'd start praying, but it felt wrong. And the Lord would give me that sense of like, get back, But anyways, one of these nights the door was opened up out of the sleep paralysis I could see up above and I could go up there. And I heard a disembodied voice from my bathroom say, you will have it said something like, you will have one warning. That is all, and I had been recently praying about, well, what do I do with this? So I've certainly been trying to figure that out, Rudy, for quite some time, and
let me clarify something about my question, by the way. I'm not saying this when I say that you can take the battle back to them. I am not saying that God's giving you or suggesting that God's giving you, you're going to make it a habit of going in the supernatural.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that you will, that in time you'll be able to successfully, spiritually battle your way into closing that door permanently.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah. And certainly when you guys brought up the drug use too, besides the sexual abuse, of course, drug use had been a part of my childhood very early. Marijuana, alcohol, and marijuana is a hallucinogen, so yeah, there is definitely the pharmacology or the pharmakia, so to speak, I would say opens up a permanent doorway. I don't know if it's semi-permanent or how that works, but people talk about opening their third eye. One of my experiences actually that I had that was it was sort of this three day experience. I didn't know at the time until after it happened, but it had coincided with all these people in the occult on like X, Twitter and Facebook, talking about how so many 40 million people had ascended because it was some type of moon or super moon. It was it was a few years ago, right? Well, I had an experience where I had unintentionally ascended, right? And I was taken up by this entity. And it was perfect. The date was perfect. It coincided with all these other people that had intentionally ascended, right? And I can, if you want, I can tell that story or if you want to, I mean, I've got stories for days about these. That one's actually quite interesting because that kind of leads into the fairy thing. But it was when I met, it's when I met what people call the Nordics, and it's when I met what people call the Nordics, and it's when I had really first experience calling on the name of Jesus not working for the first time, at least having a sort of pause moment. So if you want, I can get into that, or if you want to go somewhere else, it's up to you.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know about the Nordics, but my understanding, listening to Richard Dolan, is that there's kind of 4 classes of UFO kinds of creatures that are out there. You've got, we talked about this on that episode too, Rudy, the insectozoids, the reptilians, the Greys, and the Nordics.
Mm-hmm.
And from everything that you hear about them, they remind me very much of some of the stories that you read about what the Watchers look like.
And
like
fairies,
tall, blonde, white, beautiful creatures that they look almost exactly like us, but just not quite.
Yeah, it's it's this uncanny sort of. You would first look at it, you would think this is a human, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then, as you would look further at this being, you'd realize that's not a human that I'm looking at, And I connect them with the fair folk, because if you look at the fair folk, they, it's the same description. I would say that it's just what we're looking at when people talk about the fair folk. We're just looking at the same thing, just repeated throughout history with a different name,
Now, when you say the fair folk, just to clarify for people, is that the same as the fairies or not?
Yeah. So, people say the fae, fairy. When people say, the reason why I say the fair folk and the fae is because if I say fairy, it has a certain, people think I'm talking about homosexuality, or they think I'm talking about Tinkerbell.
Right.
Which I had dreams when I was a kid of apparently dreams that I didn't remember until fairly recently when I had made this fairy connection of going into my backyard and picking up these little people in my hand and talking with them. And these dreams flooded back to me, and I was like, whoa, and I have that video. I don't know if you had seen that video where this thing, it's either a fairy or it's a bug. I think it's too big to be a bug. It's too weird. If you haven't seen that video, I'll send it afterwards. But I caught a sort of Tinkerbell-like entity. What would be classified as looking like Tinkerbell, a small miniature entity. But the way that I conceptualize this, and you sort of asked me about this earlier, Doug, and this answer that better, is I look at these entities as the Lord, he made the heavenly hosts, and some of the heavenly hosts have fallen, right?
Yes.
And that's where we get the terminology of the Watchers. I mean, that's, at least one part of the heavenly hosts. But I also believe that, Paul talks about, is it in Ephesians, where he talks about us being freed from the elementals, or the elemental spirits.
Galatians. Yeah, and probably Colossians as well.
Okay. I think the Lord, having these councils, divine councils set up, he likes his creation to have, not that he can't just rule it all by his own ability, of course he can, but he likes his creation to participate in making the gears grind, if that makes sense. So the way I conceptualize things like the fairy or the fair folk is they were, just like Bigfoot, they're often associated with woodland. So I would think that these were elemental beings that were at one time loyal to Yahweh, and they are territorial, so they're over a type of wood. People talk about, like the suicide forest, so to speak. There's a certain sense when you go into that forest, and then there's some forest you go into and it feels wonderful, right? And I would think that that's maybe a reflection of the entity's loyalty to Yahweh when you go into that area. I don't know, but the way that I conceptualize these entities when they reveal themselves to men, and are called fairy, is they're elemental spirits that were set up over some type of part of creation. They were given a job over that part of creation, and that specific part of creation, to sort of I don't know if it have dominion over it, but to sort of
tend it or something like that.
Yeah, because obviously dominion was supposed to be for man, right? But
the same concept. There's the same concept that you would have over the Watchers. You know what I mean? Like, what are they doing? What are they administrating? We don't know. It's in the spiritual realm, but it was assigned to them. You know?
Sure. Yeah. And like the story I told you when I went to that place that had the green stars and ran into this entity that was trying to trap me or trick me, I had the sense that where I was like the sewer of the cosmos. It was this sort of back room, lower region, and a lot of times when I go out of body, I have that sense of where I'm going is not actually up, but it's actually down, and it's a low part of creation. It's a necessary part of creation, but it's sort of a sewer, so to speak, if that makes sense. It's not a place you'd want to hang out, but these entities traffic through there, and they seem to live in there, and that somehow connects with our physical reality, if that makes sense. That's the way I've conceptualized it. Whether it's correct or not, I'll revise it as the Lord shows me, I suppose. But
yeah, my first introduction to the fairies was in Stephen Lawhead novels. His first novel on the King Arthur story, where he turns the fair folk into the Atlanteans, which is a really interesting idea. And then they end up, their island's destroyed. They end up landing on Britain, like thousands of years before Arthur is born, but they never die. They just keep living, and then eventually they'll die. Over the years, I probably have too many weird fictional ideas in my head about what the fair folk are, but I've connected them to the Rephaim too, just because they're white and they're blonde, and that's the way the giants are described, and demonic sorts of things when you start getting into the spiritual realm of them. So very interesting to hear your story about it.
And they're specifically connected with abduction and replacing children. And I guess I'll give a shortened overview of what I had experienced when it culminated on this third or fourth day of running into these two Nordic entities. But I'll give a sort of a shortened, abridged version of that. So like the first night I had a dream, an out-of-body experience. I thought I was dreaming. I realized I was out of body. I was walking through my house, or a simulation of my house. Because if you look around, you realize things aren't right.
Right.
Things, if you remember where something is, and then you wake up the next day, you go look, you realize that I don't even own something that looks like that. And if you look at things like numbers or letters, they don't ever stay the same. It's just sort of changing. Faces do that too in that realm generally. But I go to my front door, and I open the door. While I do this, I'm in a hypnotic state. I'm not aware I'm doing this. When I become unhypnotic, I realize what's happened. It's too late. There's these three or four women in my living room that are dancing in a circle and laughing and trying to get me to sort of dance and laugh with them. And I tell them, no, you're in my house, leave. This is not your place, get out. I don't remember what happens after that. I think I went into a actual dream state after that. I believe I tried to cast them out in the name of the Lord. And then the second day was very bizarre. I was in my living room again, and I need to go back. I'm so sorry. Before those women entered into my living room, there was a scene that happened before that where I went out to my front yard, and there was the same women were dancing out in the front yard. And they were looking up at the sky, and they were saying, they're coming, they're coming. And you see these stars coming down like this, like in the beginning of what is that cinema company that the stars go and land on the
Paramount,
Yeah, Paramount.
Yeah.
Stars are on Paramount. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it sort of looks like this, where these stars are sort of falling down that way, and they're like, they're coming, the aliens are here, is what they say. And I tell them, I say, you fools, those aren't aliens. Those are watchers. Those are fallen entities. They're in rebellion. You know, I had this sense that they had this expectation. They were so happy to see them. And then that next scene happens, right, where these same women come into my house. The next day, I have an out-of-body experience where this thing that presents itself as an angel to me, which is, I know it's not an angel. I'm aware that it's not an angel. It puts its hand out to me and it's asked me if I want to come. And I don't know why, but I said, sure. I mean, how stupid can I be, right? So he grabs my hand and he takes me up. And this being claims to be an angel from the Lord. And I don't believe that. I don't think he is, or it is. But we're up in the sky, and this is the ascension event that I had talked about, right? We're up in the sky, and it's actually daytime where we are, and we're above the clouds, and there's these white amorphous blobs that are like craft, but they're shape-shifting, and they're in the skies. You know, there's a bunch of them. There's a whole fleet of them. And I'm looking at these things, and I'm holding on to this being's hand, and it's bringing me up to this place. It's telling me it's going to take me to heaven. And I asked this entity, I said, are those yours? You know, I'm trying to sort of interrogate this entity. And it doesn't want to talk about what I'm looking at. It just sort of goes, oh, and it doesn't really say anything. It's like, yeah, something. And then it takes me and it says, here's heaven. And it drops me off in this place that's like it's like the most beautiful, picturesque woodland that you can imagine. And as I'm moving, it's very beautiful. And normally you don't feel anything. It's very rare you feel anything. But as I'm moving, I realize pollen's starting to come off the grass. And it's getting on me. It's making me itch. And the trees are starting to sway. And I'm moving through this field. And I see a log. And I climb up through the log. And as soon as that grass and that pollen started making me itch and feel uncomfortable, is the moment, which I already knew, but it was sort of the moment where I was like, this isn't heaven, but this also isn't a dream. Something's wrong. So I'm trying to look for a way to escape, right? So I climb up into this log, and there's spiders in this log, and they're on my hands, and I'm looking at my hands, and I'm wiping them off, and this other one crawls on my hand, and it bites my hand, and I feel it, and it hurt. It physically hurt. And then all of a sudden, this is really weird, and Rudy, you may like this. I look at speaking in tongues as the reversal of Babel. That's my particular lean towards that. But all of a sudden, I started speaking in a tongue that I never have before and never have after. And I don't know what I said, but I knew I was communicating to the Lord. And it just came up and out of me. And I was grabbed and placed back in my body, and I woke up, right? So I was sort of this rescue call out to the Lord. The third day that this all sort of culminated, I have a dream. My wife, by the way, on the second night, she has sleep paralysis, so I know something's amping up in our home. I have a dream where I'm in my house and there's a party, and there's all these people in the party, and they're all talking to each other, and my wife's sort of walking around, and there's two people that are standing in the party that are looking at me. Everybody else is doing their own thing, but I notice these the set of people that are identical looking, and they're studying me. They're almost watching me, and they are keen on looking at what I'm doing. And I go out to my garage, and my garage is completely empty. And there's this woman that was actually, this woman was in the house. It was one other entity I had noticed, and she was making me angry. she had a shirt on that was like a political shirt about, or actually at first I thought it was a joke. So I actually thought her shirt was funny. It was a Biden. I thought it was like a "Let's Go Brandon" joke shirt. I'm in my garage. My garage is empty. It's just me and her there in my garage. And I realized that her shirt is like pro Biden. This is right around the election time, right? So I go up to her and I realize it's like, or it's a pro Kamala shirt is what it was. And I go up to this really ugly, dumb looking ogre like woman, and I say, "Do you realize what you're agreeing with? You're agreeing with the murder and the slaughter of babies, you know?" And then I sort of come to, I realize I'm in this out of body experience. This entire time I didn't realize that. And I'm looking at her and I realize she's a demon. And I realize also the same two people that were in the party have now been in the garage in the background watching this entire interaction. And I have now connected all three of them together. And I go up to the fat, ugly woman and I say to her, the Lord rebuke you. And she sort of puffed into smoke, as they often do. That's when you call it to the name of the Lord, they puff into smoke. But the two other entities didn't go. And they're standing there and they're watching me with very cold stares, just studying me. And there are these two 7-foot tall entities that have, they look like they could be male or female. And whichever one they are, both is beautiful, whether they were male or a female. And they're identical, perfect twins. Long hair, a silver suit, white skin.
Like the two dudes in the Matrix.
Yes. Actually, that's what it made me think of, was the guards for the Merovingian, right?
Right, that's right.
Right? I go up to them because I'm thinking they're with this woman, and I walk up to them. But as I'm walking up to them in my head, I'm going, I'm going to cast you out too. You're in my garage. But I have this sense that they don't say anything. They don't do anything. They're just looking at me with their arms crossed together, staring at me. I have a sense that no matter what I say, it's sort of like, that will have no effect on us. Sort of like, sir, that will have no effect on us today, And I walk up to them and I strut up to them and, let out the Lord rebuke you sort of confused way of saying it, because I'm like, something's different about these two. This isn't the same level as that fat ogre like thing. And they just look at me for a good minute straight. And then they don't puff into smoke. They decide to leave. I know that. They don't tell me, but I know that, I have a knowing. And they just phase shift. It's like they turn into heat waves, and they just phase shift into the wall behind them. And then I wake up.
But you know what's interesting, man? You know what's interesting? They still left.
Yeah,
they still left.
That's why I say it was like a pause,
There's a scripture in the Bible, and Doug, you can help me, because I can't remember it verbatim, but there's a scripture that says that this entity or this situation or whatever only goes away with fasting and prayer. Do you remember that? You know what I'm referencing?
Well, sure. Yeah, he's talking about the demon possession that the disciples cannot cast out. Right. They have. It's easy for some of them, but then with this particular one, Jesus is like, yeah, no, this is another level.
Right. So my point in saying that is not necessarily to tell you start fasting in your dream state. That's not what I'm saying, or your out-of-body experience. But what I'm saying is that not all entities react the same to a simple "the Lord rebuke you."
Yeah.
And that goes back to the point that I was making, that in the natural, in the here and the now, when you're not in that situation, it may warrant arming yourself up in additional ways than a simple "the Lord rebuke you."
Right.
So anyway, but yeah, that's fascinating.
Well, and you also see in the Gospels, it mentions a lot of times that this thing happened within the next hour. Often in response to casting out a demon or Jesus healing a sick person. Right? It says within the hour it happened. Right? So for a long time after that event, I really struggled, because I was like, does the name of the Lord have no power? You know, or were these angels from the Lord? Because I felt like they didn't really have any malevolence. You know, they were just watching. So I was trying to figure out, like, were these angels from the Lord? I don't think so. By the way, I don't think they were angels. I think they were literally
Yeah.
watchers, some type of
Absolutely.
watcher. So yeah, I've found peace about why that sort of seemed to be a pause. But you made the ultimate point, Rudy, is that they did go away. You know, so yeah.
So I wanted to read just a couple of comments from some people, and then there was one question that came up that I'd like you to answer. Maybe I'll chime in, or maybe I won't. I don't know. It's a tough one. But Matt has a couple comments. Admiral Byrd talked about meeting the Nordics in his journal. I remember hearing about that. That guy's an interesting, fascinating story for sure. He also points out that psychedelics like MEO and DMT and toad toxin are quickly gaining popularity for taking astro trips, and it's gaining steam in the mental health community, which I did not know about that. Certainly in the Joe Rogan community, they're talking about this kind of stuff more and more. And
Ketamine is a big thing
yeah,
too,
go
right?
ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was saying ketamine is a big thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Sorry,
mean,
I
it's
didn't
this is
interrupt
something
you.
that I think that the Christians need to be warned about. I think that those kinds of psychedelics are the definition of the things that are forbidden in Old Testament law, at least, and probably
Absolutely.
in New Testament with regard to pharmakia. And going back to that watcher idea, right? In Enoch and the cutting of roots, and the watchers taught us this, not because it's not real, but because we're not supposed to be crossing over. That leads to a question that Paul asked, but one more comment here from Greg. Interesting. He goes, every day on my drive to work, I drive by a home that has a fairy on a tree, an adult and child Bigfoot cut out of a wood placed in their wooded yard, a set of eyes nailed on the tree, and a wishing well placed random there too. So many images, not sure what to make of all that, but somebody's living in this world. I'll tell you that at that place. Here's the question though, that Paul is asking. The thing that I find disturbing is the idea that there seems to be a loss of control. One is taken into this realm without consent. Can you address this from a theological angle?
Okay. A loss of control. Yeah. So, and this is why I've had to sort of look at my life, and that's why I said it's a lonely, sort of sad walk at times, because you think you're the issue, you know? And certainly I would say it's definitely partially true. I would say my actions have contributed to that door being opened, right? But I also have occult family ties. You know, there's a
Right.
generational thing going on there. As far as being able to be taken without my consent, to answer that is, I mean, that's a $6 million question. That's something I'm still trying to have answered. The only answer I have repeatedly gotten from the Lord was, my grace is sufficient for you.
Yeah.
And that there is a reason that it happens, and that he has already and will use it. So my experiences translate well when I go to a place like Ghana, where people have experiences like this, and it's normal because it's part of their culture, you know? So, but as far as, you know, being taken without my consent, that's the only way I can, you know, make sense of that. You know, I don't have a good answer for that right now.
Daddy.
Yeah. Maybe just a thought from my point of view. I don't know. I haven't thought a lot about this, but it goes back to a statement that I made earlier in the physical realm. And that makes me wonder, like we have this theology, I think, that says that because it's in the spiritual realm and God is in control of the spiritual realm, and then we see Jesus casting out demons and all this kind of stuff, and it works every time Jesus does it, that therefore we just conclude that Christians can't have any kind of bad things happen in the spiritual realm, or if they do, they can all instantly just be taken care of right away. I grew up with this idea that a Christian cannot be possessed. I still don't know what I think about that, but one of the reasons they'll give is that, look, Satan can't he can't enter the temple of God, and your body's the temple of the Holy Spirit. And I'm sitting here like, well, doesn't he enter the holy place in the divine council in Job 1 and 2?
Well,
Isn't that
and I
exactly
don't
what
want
he's doing?
to interrupt you, but isn't there a story in the Old Testament where the prophet is looking over the temple, and one of the enemies of whoever comes in, and he starts a fire, and it's going to burn down the temple?
Exactly.
There's a correlation there.
And my thought is that we have a physical realm, that we have this whole thing called theodicy, the problem of evil, that exists precisely because bad things still happen in this world to Christians. They'll put it as good people. I don't like that because I'm a good Calvinist, and there are no such thing as good people. But nevertheless, bad things still happen to Christians. And it's like, well, why? Why doesn't God just get rid of it all? And it makes me wonder, why do we just immediately say, well, no, that's not how it works when we're dealing with this kind of phenomenon? We default to know that that's not how it is. Everything's perfect over there. And I'm like, well, there's a war that's raging, and this war is in heavenly places. The New Testament talks a lot about it. And yeah, they're waging it over here against us, but how do we know that there's not still some kind of battle things that are going on even in their realm? I mean, is that not what Michael and the dragon in Revelation 12 is all about? Is a spiritual war in spiritual heavenly places. So, maybe it's kind of an over-realized eschatology is the way that we put it, to say that the eternal perfect state that we idealize at the end of Revelation is there already in the spirit realm in every sense. And I'm like, well, maybe it's not. And maybe that also belongs fully to the age to come, which God has not brought to pass yet. We have the age to come in terms of the gospel is here. The kingdom of God is intruding in the world. Jesus has power over these entities. All that kind of stuff that we read about in the gospels, but there's still an overlap with the present evil age to kind of have good, reformed eschatology, two-age eschatology, get hardest boss stuff going on here. And to me, that helps me think, at least categorically, that, yeah, maybe the idea that you could be taken against your will. It's not first of all, it's not everybody. In fact, it's hardly anybody. Like Matt's story is quite unique, so I wanted to have him on. But nevertheless, it seems to me it can happen, and I think that we do have theological ways to try and understand that without, having to give up good grounded biblical theology. So,
well, and the thing is too, also, Doug. And by the way, watch yourself, because you're starting to sound charismatic, Doug. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Or maybe you're starting to sound reformed, Rudy.
Is that what it is? Probably. No, but the one thing to note is that regardless of the details of it all, at the end of the day, Matthew, you're not being abducted and disappearing. You're back.
And that was your point also that you brought up, Rudy, that look, they went away.
Right, exactly. And so Matt, at the end of the day, God's not losing control when you're going on these expeditions. God is in control every step of the way. He's protecting you no matter how much we don't understand it, no matter what's going on. Now, is it a nuisance? I mean, obviously it is, right? But if like you said, you've asked the Lord, put an end to this, and he's saying, my grace is sufficient, then there's a purpose, even if we don't understand it. But the important thing to remember, the two things that are important to remember, my takeaway basically is that calling on the name of the Lord is effective in any realm, in any circumstance. And two, that you are in his hands, man. regardless of where, when, how, what state, what situation. He has not lost control for a second.
No, you are sounding more reformed. We simply don't have the time to get into every single experience I've had.
Yeah.
So it misses countless times where a hand has grabbed me and pulled me by it's like the back of my neck, by the back of my shirt that I'm not wearing. I don't know. Feels like that, and pulls me out and literally will put me back in my body. So I agree 100%, and I believe in the sovereignty of God. And in fact, that is the one thing that the doctrine of the sovereignty of God is the one thing that I have as an anchor to comfort me when I have these things happening. If I didn't have that, I mean, it would be chaos.
Yeah. And how many people in this world have these experiences and they don't have that?
Mm-hmm. And they go insane. They literally go insane.
They go insane, like you said.
And I'll tell you this. I mean, if nothing else, right? In the meantime, as you figure out what is the bigger picture for all of this, that alone, right there, is a ministry unto itself. To tell other people who, like you said, Doug, people who do experience, who go through things like that, and are feeling very alone, to say, listen, I haven't figured it out yet, but you know what? God is in control. God continues to protect me. And you're not alone.
Yeah.
Don't go crazy.
Matt, if you had to give people one takeaway from this whole thing, what would it be? And then is there anything that you want to direct people to on your end?
Yeah. I mean, my main takeaway, I kind of already said it, is really that, and we've all kind of said it, is if this is happening to you, because trust me, there are a lot of Christians that this is happening to that have kept silent because whether they don't want to sound crazy, they don't know how to process it theologically. You're not crazy. God is in control, and there is a purpose behind it. And you may not know the purpose now, but you will know the purpose eventually. Your life is a living epistle. You are a letter, a living letter of God. And so when we get to heaven, people are going to want to read your letter and see how God worked in your life in a very unique way. And so, of course, because we live in the physical world that we do, when somebody like myself has these unique experiences, it sort of is a bit sensational, right? So it piques our interest more because it seems less common, or it seems more interesting, maybe is a way to put it. But we're already seated in heavenly places, right? So, and I said it at the beginning, you're already interacting with the spiritual, whether you know it or not, or whether you feel it or not, whether you see it or not. But for some reason, some people are able to see it. Some people are able to, the veil is thinned in some people's lives. Why? I don't know, but God is in control. It doesn't mean that you're not saved. If anybody could lose their salvation, it would be me. And my life has proven that God, his faithfulness, he's a capital F faithfulness. And I don't mean that in like capital F failure, God has been so faithful to me in so many ways. And I'm left speechless at the faithfulness of God. And so, like I said, if this is happening to you, or maybe somebody that it's happening to them, you're not crazy, they're not crazy. And I think we're going to see more of it. We already are seeing more of it happen. And more people are starting to open up and talk about it. So whatever that means, why it's happening, I don't know. As far as wanting to point people towards anything, I do have a YouTube channel where I've posted some of my videos. I did some videos where I talked about some of my experiences. One of my, a few of my experiences, they haven't all been horrible. Some of them, I believe, have been from the Lord. But I posted one video where I had an experience that I'm still trying to figure out to this day if it was truly the Lord or not. And I'm leaning towards it not being the Lord. And if you want to watch that video, you can, and you can try to figure that out. I have another video on there where I record a experience of precognition. I have the receipts. You can go and watch that. I think my YouTube channel, I mean, I can give it to you, Rudy, and you can put it in there. Just be aware that experience where at the time, I believed it was the Lord. As time has shifted, I've sort of become skeptical of who that was, I don't know what to make of that, is what I'm trying to say. Really, the main person I want to point people towards is my brother Joshua Muhammad, who's doing work in Ghana. So his mission to Ghana is he's making what's called a pastor's retreat center. It's Maranatha. And it's essentially the pastors in Ghana, they work as farmers 6 days, and then they have to come up with a service, and then they give that on Sunday. You can imagine that's very hard where you're, basically moonlighting as a pastor. So it's to give them a place to go, to get resources, to rest, to get training, good Reformed training. So that's the ministry I would want to point people towards. And as I said, I'll give you that information, Rudy, if you'd be so kind to pass that along. People can look into that.
You bet.
Pray, give towards that, whatever you want to do. Maybe you want to go on a mission. If God calls you to it, be obedient. So, but I'd want to more point my my story towards that. And we didn't really get into the stuff I had happen in Ghana. Maybe a future time, I don't know. But yeah.
We very, very much thank you, Matthew, for coming on. We've had several guys that have said the same thing in our chat room. They want to thank you. It's I don't know, it's probably both like kind of a relief feeling to know that you can talk about it, and also maybe a little bit scary. I don't know. So I appreciate you doing this, being willing to tell your story. This is one of the things that I've wanted the Fringe to be about, is to help people know that, first of all, that there are pastors out there that are willing to listen to people that have stories like this. They're not all telling you that you're crazy or that you're evil. We may not have the answers to know how to help or whatever, but we can listen. And I think that that's important for pastors to be doing, because these things really are real. And there are a lot more people out there that are having these experiences than most pastors could ever even begin to imagine, because they won't tell them, because it's not safe to do that. So I hope that the Fringe is something that, we can do this from time to time. I'm not going to make it every episode, but it is important. And thank you for sharing your videos and your time and your story. And thank you everyone for coming on the live stream. It's been fun to do this. We're going to do it more often, I hope, in the future. And thanks everybody for watching the Reformed Fringe over there on YouTube, and listening, I suppose, wherever else we have it. And if you want to be part of our community, come over to the reformedfringe.com, reformedfringe.com. We're having fun. This is a great group of people, and I don't think anybody would be disappointed to join it.